My coworker loved me, but I had a boyfriend. About a decade ago, fresh out of high school and on winter break from college, I landed a part-time job at a retail chain that was something like a Dollar General, though not exactly. I had just turned 18, and while I was eager to make some extra money, I was also nervous. It was my first real job, and the prospect of dealing with crowds of people every day was daunting for an introvert like me. But I knew I needed to push myself out of my comfort zone. The store was always packed, especially with the holiday season in full swing, so my first few weeks were spent working the registers. It was a baptism by fire, thrown into the deep end with lines of impatient customers and the constant buzz of holiday music playing on a loop. I quickly learned the ropes, though, and while I could manage the work, it drained me. Being an introvert, the endless interactions with customers wore me down. I could handle social situations when necessary, but I preferred solitude. When they finally allowed me to try something different restocking shelves, I was relieved. This suited me much better. I could work at my own pace, focusing on the task at hand without the pressure of engaging with customers. One day, I was assigned to work in a specific department with Ken, the department head. Ken was well liked by everyone at the store, known for his friendly demeanor and sense of humor. My interactions with him had been minimal up to that point, but he always seemed approachable. As we worked together tidying up and restocking his area, Ken praised my meticulous attention to detail. My spatial awareness and particular nature made his department look pristine, and he appreciated that. He must have seen potential in me, because from that day on, I was almost exclusively assigned to his area whenever I wasn't needed at the register. Over time, I got to know Ken better, and I grew to genuinely like him as a friend. He reminded me a lot of my best friend from high school, immature in some ways, but with a self-deprecating, sarcastic sense of humor that matched my own. We clicked, and our shifts together became something I looked forward to. We joked around, shared stories, and helped each other out. I didn't have many friends at the store, so having someone like Ken made the job more enjoyable. At this point in my life, I had never been in a romantic relationship. I was focused on my studies and didn't consider myself particularly attractive or deserving of romantic interest. My self-esteem was low, and I often dismissed any signs that someone might be interested in me, assuming they were joking or playing a prank. I was also notoriously bad at picking up on signals. It usually took one of my friends pointing it out for me to realize when someone was flirting with me. Even then, I rarely believed it was genuine. I was also a very private person. Even with people I knew well, I rarely shared anything too personal. Too many past experiences had taught me that vulnerability could be used against me, so I kept my personal life tightly guarded, sharing only with family and very close friends. By September, nearly 10 months into the job, I had settled into a comfortable routine with Ken. We had developed a good system, and we worked well together. Our friendship had grown, and I considered him one of the few people at work that I could truly rely on. He told me not to look at it until he was gone. I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe it was a joke or a silly note. I tucked it into my locker and forgot about it until the end of my shift. As I was leaving the store, I remembered the note. Sitting in my car, I unfolded the paper, expecting some harmless joke or maybe a doodle. Instead, my heart stopped as I read the words, "I really like you, and if you want to meet outside of work, here's my number." I was paralyzed with shock. I had never imagined that Ken saw me that way. It had never crossed my mind that he might be interested in me romantically. At the time, I was also working a summer, fall seasonal job and had developed a crush on someone there. I'll call him Adam. My feelings for Adam were confusing and new, and I wasn't sure what to do. But one thing was clear. I didn't see Ken in a romantic light. I liked him as a friend, but nothing more. I didn't want to hurt him, but I also didn't want to lead him on or give him false hope. After much deliberation, I decided to ignore the note. However, being the introvert I am, I knew I had to be careful. I didn't want Ken to think I was leading him on or flirting with him. So I made a conscious effort to keep our interactions strictly professional. I avoided any behavior that could be misinterpreted and tried to maintain some distance while still being friendly. Things were awkward for a while, but eventually, we fell back into our old routine. I assumed he had gotten a hint. I didn't even save his number. I threw the note away, thinking that my silence was all the answer he needed. But I was wrong, very wrong. By late November, Adam asked me out, and I was over the moon. It felt like everything was falling into place. Within a few weeks, we were officially dating, and I was happier than I had been in a long time. Since I didn't use social media, there was no way anyone at work could have known about Adam unless I told them directly. I kept my personal life private, so as far as Ken and my other co-workers were concerned, nothing had changed. At work, things with Ken seemed to be back to normal. We were joking and working together as if the note had never happened. I thought everything was fine. Nearly a year had passed since Ken gave me the note. One evening, we were working a closing shift together. It was just the two of us and the front-end supervisor in the building. We were in the back near the cardboard baler, crushing empty boxes from his department, our usual end-of shift routine. I was relaxed, completely unsuspecting, when Ken suddenly turned to me, his face serious. He said he couldn't hold it in any longer, that he had been pretending for too long. He confessed that he had fallen in love with me and couldn't go on hiding his feelings. He asked me out on a date, saying he had been waiting for over a year for me to respond to his note. He accused me of leading him on, of flirting with him and playing with his emotions. He said I had hurt him deeply by ignoring his feelings. I was completely blindsided. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what was happening. How could this be happening? I had been so careful to avoid giving him the wrong impression. I thought we had moved past this. As I stood there, speechless, Ken pressed on. "Well, do you have anything to say to me?" he demanded. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt a cold sweat forming on my forehead. All I could manage to say was, I have a boyfriend." Ken's face fell, his expression shifting from hope to devastation in an instant. He immediately began to apologize, saying he would never have asked me out if he had known I was in a relationship. But his apologies quickly turned to anger, and I could see the hurt and betrayal in his eyes. He began to raise his voice, his words coming out in a rush of frustration and pain. "Why didn't you tell me you had a boyfriend? We spend all this time together, joking and laughing, and you never mentioned it. You've been leading me on all this time. How long have you had a boyfriend? How could you keep that from me? There's no way you have a boyfriend. You must be lying." His words hit me like a barrage of bullets, each one piercing through my chest. I felt my throat tighten with fear. We were alone in the back room, and the only other person in the building was up front, too far away to hear anything. I was cornered, and for the first time, I felt genuinely afraid of Ken. I wasn't a small girl at 5'9". I was strong and used to hard work on the farm, but Ken towered over me at 6 feet and had the weight to easily overpower me if he wanted to. His anger was palpable, and I could see the rage building inside him as he continued to berate me. I had never seen this side of Ken before. I had seen him mad on occasion, but never like this, and certainly never directed at me. His words cut deep, and I could feel tears welling up in my eyes as he accused me of leading him on, of playing with his emotions. I tried to explain, my voice shaking, that I never intended to flirt or lead him on. I told him that I didn't mention my boyfriend because it never came up in conversation. It wasn't something I would just bring up out of the blue. But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Ken continued to rant, calling me heartless, accusing me of toying with him, and finally ordering me to leave the back room and leave him alone. Shaken and scared, I did as he asked, retreating to the front of the store where I could still hear the echoes of his anger in my mind. The incident haunted me for years. Not long after, I left that job for unrelated reasons, and Ken quit about 2 years later. I saw him occasionally in the store before he left, and he was a shadow of the person I had known. He was distant, moody, and unrecognizable, not just to me, but to everyone. I couldn't shake the guilt that gnawed at me, wondering if I had been the catalyst for his downward spiral. I questioned if things would have turned out differently if I had been upfront with him from the start, if I had told him I wasn't interested after he gave me the note. Maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't have ended up in such a dark place. Maybe he would have been okay that it took me years to come to terms with what happened, to accept that I couldn't change the past. I realized that while I might have made mistakes, I wasn't responsible for Ken's actions or his mental health. Ideally, I should have had an honest conversation with him after he gave me the note, letting him know I wasn't interested in a romantic relationship. But I will never know if that would have made a difference, and it's the not knowing that still haunts me from time to time.